Okay, that's all right. Fox East.
You got a guy in better than that.
Madam Speaker, when I was listening very carefully to the Leader of the Opposition. When I added up all those figures, it came to $2 billion to me. But anyhow, I left school a long time ago. It sounded like $2 billion to me. So we'll read them again. You know, 1 point this, 700 and this, 500. No, that's okay. No, don't worry. I'm adding them. I remember it. It came to 2 billion. 2 billion. So it sounded like he had it right. No, it sounded like the Prime Minister had it right. 2 billion.
He said on average.
2 billion.
On average.
Anyway, the first thing I want to do,
average.
Madam Speaker, as I join this debate this afternoon, in the few minutes that I have to speak, the Foreign Minister of Malaysia was visiting the cabinet of Perry Christie when he was then Prime Minister, and he told two stories. The first, he said, is that he had been away from his home for 6 weeks doing the work of the foreign minister, doing what foreign ministers do, which is to go to foreign lands and say hello to people. Yes. And he said, when he walked into the cabinet room, the Prime Minister said, "Are you sure this is the right meeting you're in?" Because they hadn't seen him in a while. And then secondly, he made the point that one day he was at the United Nations dealing with some major matter with Malaysia, and the phone rang while he was on the floor of the UN, and it was one of his constituents. And the constituent was agitated because the water pump wasn't working in his constituency. And he said to him, "But I'm at the United Nations now. I'm trying to deal with this international problem." And the constituent said, "But the water pump isn't working." So he had to put that UN stuff aside and deal with the water pump. So that's my starting point with this whole exercise, which is that if you look at a budget and the budget exercise and the rituals which we go through annually, the budget means nothing unless the people of the country can see, touch, and feel what those figures mean. And we, on this side, have dedicated ourselves to organizing a budget that people can touch, see, and feel. And that is going to be the mantra going forward for me: touch, see, and feel. A people-focused budget. And I'm also doing this in part because in my other capacity, I have my eyes firmly planted on the year 2026. And I am saying to all who would listen to me that we need your support in that year. Because 5 years is not enough time to get the job done. We need 5 more years. And so, as Lyndon Pindling would have said, steady as she goes.
Steady as she goes.
And every year, we're going to chip away at it and chip away at it and chip away at it. And, you know, you go through ups and downs. In 2008, there was a banking crisis, Madam Speaker. And I said then, I was in the Senate in 2008, and I was speaking and referred to the book of Genesis, where Pharaoh calls on Joseph to interpret a dream which he had. And the interpretation of the dream was that there would be 7 years of plenty, you know, and you would have 7 good years. And when you had the 7 good years, you have to save up because the 7 lean years are coming. That also has been a focus of my views in public life, that the way we've managed this budget is that this year, we are on the way to, first of all, the lowest level of borrowing in a generation.
Yes.
And this will allow the credit space, the latitude to put money on the ground. And that must be job one, put money on the ground. The budget is going to pay for so many things this year. It's going to pay for the scholarships for the students that will come and apply through the Ministry of Education. It will help Jamal Strawn, who is the Member of Parliament for Nassau Village, to put that community center together. And I want to congratulate him on putting that community center together. It's a big step in helping to build community. You're going to get the water in Eleuthera fixed. That's what the budget's going to do.
Good stuff.
The road in Red Bays has been finished. That's what the budget's going to do. And you're going to be finishing and fixing the roads in Exuma,
Yes.
building the airport in Cat Island, getting the power back on and up and running in Acklands. So many things this budget will do because it is focused on making sure that we help people. And one of the ways that we're helping people too is the member for Mount Moriah, as you know, is the chair of the Beaches and Parks. And that is a way, again, that funding can be put in the hands of ordinary men and women to do work, to clean up and make our island clean and be maintained. So there's lots that coming.
Excuse me,
Madam-
1 minute, Foxhill. Honorable member for Central, Grand Bahama. Do you respect the chair? Why are you drinking coffee or tea? No, I'm not testing. But I just said not to bring those cups back. You could bring water, or water bottle, or a glass of water. But if we bring the coffee cup and I allow that, then I have to give everybody the opportunity to bring the coffee cup. Bounce, we could just set a rule. And we just want that rule to be obeyed, okay? Maybe making no fuss. All right. No. This is, you can ask for a glass. All right? Don't bring it back. That's all, Madam Speaker said. All right. Thank you very much. You may proceed, Honorable Member.
You will note, Madam Speaker, in this budget, there is for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs vote, and I will really spend most of my time discussing what the Ministry of Foreign Affairs does, the monies which have been allocated. The Minister of State will deal largely with the public service. But I would like to say before going into foreign affairs that the Minister, in my view, is doing an excellent job in executing the work which is before us. There are some structural issues which I've tried to explain about what we are attempting to do in the public service. But one of the main complaints is that things take so long. So, for example, every day you would get in our phones a message which says, I've been working for the public service for 20 years. As a matter of fact, someone just stopped me at the doorstep coming in here this morning. I've been working for 20 years. I'm still on weekly. I need to be put on permanent pension. I've tried to think about why this is an issue, but I'm told that the banks, if you're not on permanent pensionable, the banks somehow don't lend you money. I don't know why that is, since jobs are secure, whether you're weekly or not. And secondly, I was wondering whether or not it's because we don't have a national pension plan, which is portable across employers, which may be contributory or non-contributory. But whatever it is, there is this complaint. And I've tried to explain, first of all, that the public service minister does not and neither does the Minister of State promote people in the public service. The role of promotions, transfers, discipline, that is the responsibility of an instrument in the Constitution called the Public Service Commission. The Public Service Commission makes those decisions. The way those decisions get to us is through the Ministry of the Public Service. And the starting point is the ministry itself. So, for example, the Ministry of Public Service cannot advance someone to the Public Service Commission for promotion unless that ministry or department makes a recommendation to the Ministry of the Public Service. That's how it works. And the starting point is the department or the ministry. And I explained over the Labor Day weekend in Grand Bahama that one example that I met. I left office by fair means or foul in 2017. And when I left, I was the immigration minister. There were, I would say, 300, I'm using round numbers, people who were hired as immigration officers. So the rank when I left in 2017 was about 300, I think classes of 150 each or so, were trainee immigration officers. When I came back, I was no longer immigration minister 4.5 years later. Not one single one, I'm advised, had been confirmed in their positions in the 4.5 years. Not one, not one. So when we got there in 2021, it was our responsibility to try and see what actually happened. Now, during the 4.5 years, the intelligence coming back was, for those people who were complaining about this, said, well, they're Mitchell's babies, so you go to him if you want to get confirmed. That's what they say was being said. Who knows what the truth is. But the fact is, when we got there, they had not been confirmed. And these confirmations are just now cycling through the system. They may be almost coming to an end, almost. And this is 18 months into our term. So the point I'm making is that this is not a very quick or dynamic process. And I invite the leader of the opposition, if he wishes, to come and see the state of the offices that the public service actually occupies. I did a tour myself. There are files everywhere. It's a fire hazard. There are so many files. You can't find anything. It's stacked up to the roof. It needs to be put in a new building, and thankfully that we're working on as well. But the working conditions of those who work for the public service are simply not the best, let me put it that way. And the same thing applies to the Public Service Commission that's been working part-time up to now. We have decided this year that they should really come on full-time to try and see if we can get through this huge backlog. For example, we learned that there was not a general assessment done for 8 years. 8 years. So people have been stuck in these jobs like clerk, assistant clerk, executive officers, those people below the level of first assistant secretary. And nothing was done to assess them so that they could go to the next stages in their careers. And this would mean thousands of people across the system, to the point where a request was made of the cabinet to change the policy to obviate on a one-off situation the need for an assessment test or an assessment exercise to be done requiring you to sit various courses just on a one-off basis to get through this. Otherwise, we would never get through the backlog. It is the most fascinating thing for me that this huge backlog, and we have to find some way to get on top of it because it affects morale in the public service. You have, for example, I know the Foreign Service, people who are trainee administrative cadets actually acting in positions of executive authority at the level of Deputy High Commissioner, simply because the system hasn't caught up with where they're supposed to be administratively. So this is a problem, and I must say that the minister has really attacked this with aplomb. She's put together a great team, and we're moving forward. So in terms of my attitude, my colleagues know about budgets, though, is I tend to be not very respectful, let me put it that way. I'm an old man now, so I'm entitled to these things. So my view is that the government lays out what its plans are when it came to office in the blueprint. And I had a discussion with the people at finance, and I said simply this: do you have the resources to provide the support for the government's programs? And all I needed to hear was, yes, we have the resources to do so. After that, I'm off to work. And whatever resources the Ministry of Finance supplies to us, the ministry uses them to the best of its ability. And if the resources are not available, if we have to cut back, then you cut back. But the ministry has been provided, in my view, with the resources to support the work. Over year on year, we've had an increase of approximately $7 million in funding over last year's subventions. And largely, these have to do with the fact that the Prime Minister has laid out for us this mandate, that the number one foreign policy matter for the Bahamas in the international sphere is climate change, because climate change is existential for our country. And the only way to combat this is to expand our reach across the world so that at every opportunity, the voice of the Bahamas can be heard saying, climate change, climate change, climate change. And that's what he has been doing. He's led the team with this, and all of us follow and support that issue. And it's been really an honor to watch this unfold at work, to see the respect which the country has engendered as a result of the work which has been put into this issue of climate change. You will note, Madam Speaker, that the Vice President of the United States is to visit the Bahamas officially tomorrow, and will be here for several hours before returning to Washington, D.C. I think, apart from the visit of Condi Rice here when I was last minister, the previous high-level visit to this country was probably Jack Kennedy in 1962. At the very top of the executive, and I'm told he stayed here for 7 days. So this is now a vice presidential visit, and unfortunately there's not going to be an interface with the public at this time, because it is really a multilateral meeting, because the Bahamas is chair of CARICOM, and so this is the site for the meeting. The meetings will be held at Atlantis. And all countries of the Caribbean, of the CARICOM area, will be bringing in representatives at the heads of government level, with one or two exceptions. And also coming in will be the President of the Dominican Republic. And that meeting will take place tomorrow. And amongst the items, again, first is climate change, the question of national security, the question of food security. Those are three important issues on the multilateral level. And then for the region, one of the most important issues is the question of what is happening in Haiti. And I'll come to Haiti in a second. This is a process which began at the Summit of Americas last year in Los Angeles. At that summit, the heads of government of CARICOM and the Dominican Republic requested a meeting with President Biden. And at the meeting, they discussed what they felt was a lukewarm engagement by the United States with this region. The criticism always is that the United States is only interested in security issues, not any other developmental issues. And so the prime ministers and president asked for this meeting so that the U.S. would engage on matters beyond security matters. In other words, drug interdiction, people smuggling, those issues. Developmental issues are key to our sector. One of them, of course, is food security. The other is the question of financing for development, which keys into the whole issue of climate change. Financing for development is an important topic because we know that one of the reasons, as I said, in designing the budget the way it is because we need, as a country, the credit space because of our level of GDP per capita. No one's going to come to our rescue if something happens. We have to go to the markets and we have to find the money ourselves. And the question is, how much is that money going to cost? And if you don't get concessionary rates because of GDP per capita, then you're paying more than you should pay. So we've been trying to talk about another aspect of looking at how you provide loans to countries like ours. And that is the vulnerability index, to say that countries that have and face these external shocks, like hurricanes, and you know Grand Bahama has been hit in the last decade 4, 5, 6 times by hurricanes. So when you're in that position, even though your GDP per capita is at a certain level, the view is that you ought to get concessionary financing to deal with these things of protection, that is mitigation and defense, adaptation to the severity of these storms that are occurring. And so that's going to be one of the topics in the multilateral forum. There'll also be an opportunity for a bilateral forum, which will be Prime Minister and Vice President speaking together about the issues which the Bahamas is interested in. And we are, of course, interested in pre-clearance returning to Grand Bahama. We're interested, of course, in the continued security cooperation, and we're interested in the Green Climate Initiative, which affects our shipping sector. And you know, my favorite hobby horse is the whole question of the United States and their visa policies for Bahamians. This is still a vexing problem. As far as I'm concerned, it's an irritant in the relationship in the sense that, according to their stats, the last I checked, the rejection rate of Bahamians applying for visas to the United States is just somewhere over 8%. So 92% of the people, they say, get through the system. The problem is those in the 8% complain bitterly about the way they're treated when they go to the embassy by people and the way they're spoken to. And of course, that the rejections often on the face of it don't make sense. There is a particular rubric that they use in their law called 2141B. And that is a general thing which says you don't have sufficient ties to the Bahamas, and so therefore on that basis we are rejecting. Now I told Bahamians who complained to me, number one is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Bahamas government, has no influence, I repeat, no influence over the granting of U.S. visas, none whatsoever. Two, the American authorities say that even they cannot instruct a consular officer what to do in whether to grant or not grant a visa. Number three, their law gives a subjective right or power to the consular officer, not an objective right, a subjective right to say yes or no to a visa. So these are difficult things to overcome. There are also quite strict laws with regard to if you are suspected of being involved in any kind of criminal activity or if you've overstayed your time in the United States. And I just say as a matter of caution, because people often ask us about their rules. I'm not an expert on their rules, but it is their country, not our country, number one. Number two, it's an easy country to migrate to. It's not a difficult country to migrate to. So if you want to migrate to the United States permanently, there are legal avenues for you to do so. Number three, do not overstay your time in the United States. Don't, because that is often fatal to your being able to obtain a visa going to the United States. So I just say those as words of caution. But we welcome the visit to our country by the Vice President, and I'm sure that the Prime Minister will adequately put the case for CARICOM and will put the case for the Commonwealth of the Bahamas during the visit. This is his second interface with her, and I think that there ought to be a regular and continuing conversation with the United States. They are our largest trading partner. They are the most powerful cultural and economic influence on the Bahamas. We are joined at the hip, so we have no choice in the matter but to engage. I say that we have similar interests, not the same. So we have similar interests, but not the same. And one of our interests, of course, is that we believe in freedom of speech, of democracy, of the rule of law, and all that is attendant with those things. But even the former Governor General, when he was welcoming the South Korean ambassador, the Honorable Arthur Hanna, to the Bahamas once, he said to him, you know, South Korea and the Bahamas have much in common. We're both nestled next to giants, and we're only as independent as the giants allow. So even in that space, however, there's enough for us to cut our own path and to make our voices heard. Pope John Paul II used to always remind us that every culture, all people, have a right to exist, which is intrinsic to them. Had nothing to do with whether you got power or riches or what color you are and all the rest of it. You have a right to exist. And so long as you have your voice, this government, so long as we have our voices, we are going to use it for and on behalf of the Bahamian public, no matter who comes, no matter who comes. The second issue that will be raised, both in the multilateral and in the bilateral context, will be the situation in Haiti. We expect, Madam Speaker, in the next few days, for a meeting to be convened in in Kingston, Jamaica, which will bring together, we hope, the government with stakeholders from Haiti in the opposition, led by three former prime ministers that these men are engaged under the rubric, the Eminent Persons Group. And these three men are Dr. Kenny Anthony, who is the former Prime Minister of St. Lucia, Right Honorable Perry Christie, who is the former Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and Honorable Bruce Golding, who is the former Prime Minister of Jamaica. And it will be their responsibility to use their good offices and the good offices of CARICOM to see whether or not we can map a way forward for a political settlement in Haiti, which will allow for general elections to be held in that country, free and fair, in an atmosphere of security. The Prime Minister had made this one of the matters which he wanted to address before handing off his chairmanship to the next Prime Minister, who will be the Prime Minister of Dominica, Roosevelt Skerritt, when that transfer takes place on the 1st of July in Trinidad. And on the 4th of July 2023, we will be celebrating 50 years of CARICOM, the founding of CARICOM. And even though Dominica is going to be the chair, the Trinidadians have asked for the meeting to take place in Trinidad because that's where the Treaty of Chaguaramas was actually signed in 1973. So we'll be meeting in Trinidad, and the chair will be, the Prime Minister of the Bahamas will be handing off to the Prime Minister of Dominica. And in that meeting, in Kingston, Madam Speaker, we're hoping to be able to map some way forward. The issue always is not to try and impose any solution on Haiti. This has to be a Haitian-led solution. Because, first of all, it's their country, and they have to decide what happens there. Secondly, you wouldn't want people to impose a solution on us. Thirdly, there is always a resistance in Haiti to people who see outsiders from coming outside their country and trying to impose a solution. So I really hope that the exercise in Kingston is successful, because Lord knows that country has really suffered so much. I mean, they just had another earthquake, hundreds of people injured or killed in the midst of a governmental crisis, which included in the last 5 years their president being assassinated. This budget, Madam Speaker, also reflects something which is philosophical for me, and it has to do with the work of members of Parliament. I have been delayed by a fluxion of time in properly addressing the need for a parliamentary service bill to flesh out the rules and regulations for the Management and Budget Committee of the House, both of which should lead to the separation of the House of Assembly and its dependence on the executive for the execution of its work. So there is work coming on this issue, and just using the men's room a couple of minutes ago, I was reminded of how Milo Butler was locked up in the bathroom when they didn't want him to come upstairs to speak. So I kept checking the locks to make sure that I could get out in time for the 4 o'clock start of the meeting. Just joking. I reminded myself also of so I was really just contemplating the inadequacy of the building that we're in. I was reminded there was a female minister was telling me that she went down to another public building, and as she was using the stall in the public building, a lady who was sitting next to her pulled her gown under the stall and said, "Could you help me? I've been trying to get a hold of you for some time." But this is how inadequate our public buildings are. Certainly, you know, we've outlived this building. 1815 is a long time. Many generations have come by, and it's now time for our own generations to put our imprimatur on this. So that is something which we're still working on, and hope within the next year to be able to provide members of the committee with some drafts to deal with. But what I said at the start of the term in 2021 is that there is a need to empower incumbents in their work. The amount of discretionary spending which is demanded of incumbent members of Parliament. I've had a long time at this now, since 1992, and I think that I have never experienced in my public life the level of demands from constituents with regard to discretionary spending. I've never experienced this. This is incredible. And I've tried to figure out what's actually going on, the frantic nature of the requests. And I just go back perhaps to the study by the central bank in 2018, when they said that people in this country who make $30,000 a year or less are unable to make ends meet. 50% of them reported that they could not make ends meet at the end of the month. And it has gotten worse, Madam Speaker, because it seems to me, I know people say that crime and immigration are issues which concern them, but it seems to me right now that inflation has got to be the #1 issue that's affecting people, because the cost of everything has become more expensive. So the need for discretionary spending and the reliance on the social services systems is becoming more acute, even as the economy rebounds. One of the things I thought, therefore, would help members of Parliament is to allow for the $3,500 for the office accommodation, and which is now $2,500, and $100,000, which is a capital grant to go up to $150,000. Left to me, it'd be $1 million, but it ain't up to me. And what I wanted to argue is this: this is not new money. This is not new money. This is not additional money. My argument is that if I want to dig a well, as I recently, because there's a flooding problem in Fox Hill. So I had a contractor come and price what it would cost to dig a well. The price for digging a well is $15,000. Now, normally what you would do is you would go to the Ministry of Works and say, I need a well here, I need a well there, I need a well there. But the Ministry of Works has to have things budgeted. It has to be in their program of work. So unless it's an absolute emergency, there's a lot of bureaucracy before the Ministry of Works can actually kick into gear. My argument is that a member of Parliament ought to be able to direct that spending if he needs a capital project done within his constituency. So what you do is the allocations that would normally fall, for example, for the Ministry of Works, some of that can be transferred over to the direction of the Member of Parliament. And by that means be able to fix the demands that people have on members of Parliament for various matters. To clear out a well, for example, costs $2,500. So given the level of what you've got available to you, it's gone, no matter, because, and then what is also important is the level of social spending that you have to do. The bands that you have to support, the public schools that you have to support, and the various work that they do. So by the time you look around, the capital grant has disappeared. And I'm saying that this may help in a small way to try and improve that situation for members of Parliament. And members of Parliament have a very important job to do in trying to keep the government connected to the people who they govern, but also in making sure that the peace is kept in their communities, and also making sure that the infrastructure in their communities is up to standard and up to scratch. And the citizens of the country, in terms of the level of public education, see no distinction, it appears, between public monies and your own personal monies. I was in opposition at the time, and there was a problem with the track around one of the parks in Fox Hill. And so my response when I was asked, well, to help with fixing it, I said, well, I will approach the Ministry of Works with regard to getting it repaired. And the constituent's reply was, you're a millionaire, you can fix it yourself. And that's very often the attitude. The attitude is the Member of Parliament can just go in his pocket and fix it. But of course, that's not the case. The case is that most of us are men and women of ordinary means, and that you have to, I'm sorry? It is, most of us are. But you have to apply yourself in the judicious use of public funds to meet the greater demands of the Bahamian public. Speaker, I'd like now to turn to an issue which is in the public domain. And it again appears in the newspapers here this morning. The Prime Minister, in his budget statement, made a statement about matters in Grand Bahama. And he said that it is time for decisive action. For the second time in my experience in this term, an investor has decided that somehow that throws down the gauntlet in public, which requires them to take issue with the government publicly over a matter involving their investment. Even though each investor, as far as I know, understands that the Prime Minister has an open door policy, and given the level of investment, it's possible for you to simply pick up the phone and say X, Y, or Z. But be that as it may, free country, so you approach whatever you want with your investment, so on and so forth. The first example was Atlantis, who decided that they were going to publicly throw down the gauntlet in the face of the Bahamas government over the decision on RCL. And now, with regard to the decision on the Grand Bahama Port Authority, one of the shareholders has decided, well, first of all, there was an announcement from the Grand Bahama Port Authority, which made various statements about the state of investment. And then one of the owners is now in the newspaper this morning saying what he will and will not do with regard to the Grand Bahama Port Authority. Now, you remember or recall from history 1969. The then Prime Minister of the country was Lyndon Pindling, and there was a social problem of social and racial discrimination in Grand Bahama, and the exclusion of Bahamians from the mainstream of the economy in Grand Bahama. And he went up there at the opening of Borco in 1969, and he said that if the social order did not bend, it would have to break. That caused a rift in his own party. And shortly after that, there was a split in the Progressive Liberal Party. But the result of the speech was the full Bahamianization of the city of Freeport. And the benefits of being Bahamian and being in Freeport grew exponentially for Bahamians following that address. The agreement, the Hawksbill Creek Agreement, was signed in 1955 and enshrined in the statute law of the Bahamas. There were a set of mutual promises in this agreement, one of which was to build certain infrastructural projects, to maintain the city, to promote investment in the city. And for some time now, people have watched with alarm as the storms have come, true, but it just seems as if assets were being dumped, and there just didn't seem to be any new investment coming into the country. And there's a lot of pressure on the ground in Grand Bahama itself for the government to do something to act. In fact, I read the response of the leader of the opposition to the Prime Minister's statement, as quoted in the Tribune anyway. And he said that he too was concerned about Grand Bahama Port Authority and its performance, but he did not agree that the government should own the Grand Bahama Port Authority, if I'm quoting you correctly. So that there is this difference of opinion on what to do. But both sides agree, I would say, that something needs to be done, because you have a city which is built for 250,000 people, sitting there with all of this infrastructure and potential for development. And if you go to North Eleuthera, you can't get a parking space on New Year's. But Grand Bahama, 10 times larger than North Eleuthera, the airport is empty. And you ask yourself how a shareholder can expect for there to be change when the airport gets ruined by the storm, the investors decide not to do anything to fix it, they offload it on the government for $1. So that's gone. Then the hotel, that's offloaded on the government, so that's gone. I just walked through Port Lucaya. They agreed that the tourism product is up, but they say there's no promotion going on in Port Lucaya, so The lady says, I'm starving here. She says something 4,500 tourists came last week. Not one came here. And, you know, I'm dying on the vine here. My sons, who used to take care of the bills, can't. I don't want them to be forced into criminality. But who is responsible for investment, attracting investment to the city? Who is responsible for the infrastructure under the Hawksbill Creek Agreement? And then there is this substratum that's going on, this fear that's going around, that, oh, if the government takes over in Freeport, Freeport is going to collapse, or it's not going to operate properly. So that's the subtext which is going along. Not knowing that, in fact, the government has been carrying Freeport and the responsibilities of the Grand Bahama Port Authority for at least 10 years, if not more. If not more. There's an agreement between the two sides. The government is supposed to provide services to the city, and the Grand Bahama Port Authority is supposed to pay the government back for those services. There's a bill outstanding now on that matter. So it's not as if, yeah, but, you know, I'm not sure I have permission to say any of that, but I'm just saying generally that's the issue. So when I saw the statement this morning in the newspaper, I'm saying to myself, why would you want to join issue with this? Why would you join issue with this in the public? Why would you do so when the evidence is there to see on the ground what is actually happening in Grand Bahama? In fact, one of my colleagues called up this morning and said, ask them publicly when you speak about this, since they no longer have the airport, since they've gotten rid of the power company, so they're going to get rid of the roads next and give them to us for $1? Is that what they're going to do next? The roads in Grand Bahama? The roads in Grand Bahama were some of the finest roads in this country, right? As a matter of fact, when the young kids I sponsored from Doris Johnson went up to Grand Bahama, none of them had been to Freeport before, and they thought they were in Miami. They said, oh, we're in Miami. We didn't know this existed up here. But everywhere you look now, the roads are deteriorating, falling into holes. I thought it was laughable, forgive me for saying so, I thought it was laughable for them to call a press conference when I'm advised by the Ministry of Works that it cost $1 million a mile to pave a road in the Bahamas, $1 million a mile to pave a road in the Bahamas. And they are going to spend, they are boasting about spending the princely sum of $600,000 in Grand Bahama to fix the roads. Are you kidding me?
They collect service charge fees.
Yes, right, I'm saying. The government's, the minister says $6 million was spent by the government fixing the roads out in East Grand Bahama, right? And the Grand Bahama Port Authority is boasting about $600,000 in Freeport. I mean, come on.
It was paid for by the residents.
You know, and service charges are collected which support this enterprise. So the Minister for Grand Bahama did a special program, 2021. The government's resources put $9 million into help clean up Freeport. Whose responsibility was it to clean up Freeport after the storm? The government or the Grand Bahama Port Authority? I mean, it seems clear as day. If you go now, because I just did a walk in the Bahama area, there's still hurricane debris piled up on the side of the roads in Freeport. And now you want to get into a public row about whether we should move forward on this or not. Well, all we are saying, it's a minimalist argument. We're simply saying you have an agreement. It's called the Hawksbill Creek Agreement. All we're saying is, if that's the agreement, follow the agreement. Nothing more, nothing less. We don't ask you to do anything religious or, you know, acts of the deity. All we're asking you to do is follow the agreement. If you're supposed to be promoting investment in Freeport, then promote investment. If you're supposed to be putting infrastructure in Grand Bahama and supporting it, then put the infrastructure. But the Bahamas government is putting the hospital, the Bahamas government is going to fix the airport, right? And yeah, I don't know, what else are we going to do there? I mean, so many things we have to do because these are Bahamians who are up there,
Open the hotel.
Yes, right, the hotel, I forgot that, you got to open the hotel. You got to open the hotel. Yeah, you know, and it ain't got nothing to do with politics. Because, you know, some of our own supporters say, man, there's Vote F&M up there, so what you putting money in there for? I tell them, you know, first of all, your F&M today, your PLP tomorrow. That's number one. And I can try to get as many as them to do that. No, no. I said what I wanted to say. Your F&M today, your PLP tomorrow. Right. So that's number one. Yeah. Number two is, and the same thing goes for Long Island. You know, first of all, everybody in Grand Bahama got family in Nassau. And if you mistreat their family up in Grand Bahama or in Long Island, even though they're PLP in Nassau, they say, you're treating my family bad. You got to do something to help my family. That's number two. Number three, the PLPs who are in Grand Bahama and in Long Island, some of them can move to Nassau. And you don't want them converting to F&M while they're up there. You know, it's like I say, you know, you gotta save them. So I gotta keep mine, right? I gotta keep mine. You know, I tell you, my eyes are always on 2026. You know, these people who are rowing about this and that, 2026, that's the, yeah. No, they're with me. I'm only telling you, you know, when you see me in Marco City, what I doing. Just in case you miss, the message, I only tell you what I doing. And maybe I shouldn't. No, I wouldn't be wearing red tennis, I can assure you. No, I wouldn't be. I'd be wearing gold tennis. But Madam Speaker, I mean, the serious point is that they're Bahamians in Grand Bahama, and the government has to act to assist. And so what I wanted to say is, in case there is any doubt, as the person who is seconding this motion, that the Cabinet of the Bahamas is 1,000% behind the Prime Minister of the Bahamas on this issue. And I hope Mr. Haywood takes note. I hope so. Because it's more than just investment and all the rest of it. The Grand Bahama Freeport is a public good. It's not a plaything. It's not for cocktail money. Real people live there. Real development takes place. People's lives are being affected. People have put their stakes down in that city. It's a Bahamian city, and we are going to support it and help to ensure that it succeeds. So, those are the thoughts which I have today. I've said that when you examine a budget, Madam Speaker, you can look at it in many ways. You can say it's a balanced budget, you know, we're doing a good job with the deficit, so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, how does it affect people? And I think that we've more than amply demonstrated the case that the figures are there to support the Bahamian people and the Bahamian public. So, for example, the expenditure in foreign affairs. What I found in this term is that Bahamians are more traveled than at any previous time that I've been in office. So you will find that Bahamians are as far afield as the Antipodes, or in Russia, or in the Middle East, or in the Far East, or in the Americas, including Latin America. And every once in a while, you will run into some request or other from a Bahamian who is marooned or stuck or has lost a passport or some other misfortune while they're overseas. And the question always is there a Bahamian representative in that country? So we have embarked on a program to try and be sure that in the 192 countries of the world, there is at least one Bahamian representative in every one of those countries. Now that's a very ambitious thing. They can't be professional diplomats, so we are expanding the system of honorary consuls, but at the same time, we're seeking to beef up those diplomatic offices overseas. So you will note that in Toronto, there's now a consul general for the first time, and sadly, the inaugural consul general died within 2 weeks of his appointment. But shortly, the Prime Minister will announce a new appointment. We have also decided to put a consulate, which will twin with the tourism office as it does in Toronto, in Los Angeles, because of the Bahamian community in Los Angeles. And I see where JetBlue just announced in the last few days that they will be having a direct flight from Los Angeles here to Los Angeles. And you know, the very curious thing about that is people think that if you're in Los Angeles, that it is quicker to go to Hawaii than it is to go to Nassau. But in terms of flying time, it is exactly the same. 5 hours to Hawaii from Los Angeles, 5 hours to Nassau from Los Angeles. So there's a great marketing potential there. You can come to Nassau instead of going to Hawaii. So I hope that succeeds. And just recently, our ambassador to Kuwait, who is Turan Maki, just presented his credentials to the Emir of Kuwait. And I want to congratulate him on that. And also congratulate Anthony Ferguson, who is now the High Commissioner to New Zealand, who presented his letters of credence to the Prime Minister of New Zealand last week. So this is all part of a plan to try and get Bahamian presence far afield. And of course, the Commonwealth meeting is going to take place in Samoa in next year or year after next. And so New Zealand, of course, is an important stepping stone on the way to Samoa. And of course, Samoa has similarities with us on the climate change issue. We also are planning to upgrade the office in Jamaica. We are awaiting the decision of the Jamaican government about the appointment of a consul general in Jamaica. Right now, we've been using an honorary consul, and we think given the level of Bahamians, the number of Bahamians in Jamaica and the demands on the office, that it's reached a point where we actually need professional diplomats to go there. Similarly, for Trinidad and Tobago, there's a plan to upgrade the office there from honorary consul to consul general. So these are areas that we're trying to focus on growth. It was my plan before leaving office the last time that when we established honorary consulates in Houston, in Denver, and in Chicago, that these would, over the years, bump themselves up to have formal diplomats. And I want to say thanks and respects to Michael Fountain, who is our honorary consul in Chicago, who's really doing an excellent job as an honorary consul in gathering the Bahamian community there and making sure that that community is a success. He just put on an official visit for Ambassador Wendell Jones, who is our ambassador to Washington, D.C., just last week. And we're hoping that Prime Minister Davis will be making an official visit to Chicago in the fall to help promote business and cultural ties between the two countries. Of course, the busiest office is Miami, where the largest accumulation of Bahamians live. So that office has had to have additional staff to deal with the issues related to the office. So the last point I would make on the question of relations is the question of relationship with the Chinese government. and the fact that there is this situation, I'll put it, with regard to relations with China and relations with the United States. We take the position that we still support the One China policy. We also take the position that we are friends of all. That's what Lyndon Pindling said when he went to the United Nations. We have no enemies. We are friends of all, and we maintain that position. We do not believe that this is a staging ground for China for hegemonic designs on this region or for encroachments into the United States, and neither would we be a party to any such design or encroachment. The Chinese have been good development partners for us, and we think that going forward they will continue to be. But we will continue, of course, to watch the situation. So I hope that as the year ensues, the budget performs as we expect it to perform. And I'm hoping that all the small contractors who've been calling, member for Mount Moriah, you'll be able to fulfill their needs. The number one thing is I need one contract every morning. But the serious point being that this is a mechanism to assist and help people who need the help and support. I'm, again, only left to say, to express my deep gratitude for being able, for the third time, to be Foreign Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. There is still, Madam President, an aha factor with regard to the Bahamas every time I cross a border. And I run into some customs officer or immigration officer, and he sees the Bahamian passport, and he says, Bahamas, aha. So we still have that response, a very good response. So thank you to the people of Fox Hill for allowing this opportunity. I support the budget. I'm pleased to second the motion, and I congratulate the Prime Minister on putting together the best deal ever, a focused budget for people. Thank you.